ideas, any music suggestions you guys have, please let me know. And I will look them over and hopefully they'll be in the next video. So, just so everyone knows, I read 3 chapters of this each video. If you want me to read more, let me know. But certain times this book could either be really long or really short. And chapters vary. So, this is a 20-minute video. That sucks, but maybe the next one will be an hour. I don't fully know. But let's get into the book and hopefully we'll have a good time. Chapter 7. As the fall of 1917 neared, prisoners thought Germany leaned through the POW grapevine that their captors were forming a new camp in a town called Holzheim. Expectations were high, according to the POW. It was to be a prisoner's mecca fine. Prisoner's mecca. Fine, brand new buildings, spacious grounds, good scenery, good air. They did not know whether this was true, but the very possibility fostered great debate, both dour and hopeful. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Rathborne looked out into the dark night of September 11th, 1917. Dark night of September 11th, 1917. From a train heading northward from Hildeburg. Crowded in his carriage were 24 other British officers. They passed town after town, but, except from a brief stop in Kassel, the train never slowed, thwarting a plan by several prisoners to escape by leaping from a window. They were I'm having a very bad tongue twister. Apologies, people. They were destined. I need a better language. They were destined for Holzheim, the first group to be sent to the new camp. Broad-shouldered and thick-set, Rathborne had soft features and a welcoming smile. One likened his visage to face of an archbishop. Whether his look, it belied the grit and ambition underneath. Private school educated and fluent in German and Italian, Rathborne joined the Royal Marine Light Infantry on his 18th birthday. He quickly rose through the ranks, his superiors remarking that he was keen, energetic, and very good in taking charge of men. In 1912, sensing that air flight was the future, he trained to become a pilot. At the outbreak of war, he was named a flight commander, then a squadron commander, then he was placed in charge of an operational wing. The mission on which he was shot down was likely one he could have sent others to perform. As a POW, Rathborne proved no less capable. In May, he arrived at a camp in Karlsruhe, where he assumed the role of senior British officer. He fielded pleas from his fellow officers for better conditions and convinced the commandant to provide them. Escape was a high priority, but his first effort to walk straight out of the gate in civilian clothes was foiled by a spy who gave away the hiding place of his escape kit. Before he could concoct a new plan, the order came for the transfer to the new camp of Holzheim. It was after midnight when the train finally stuttered to a halt, and Rathborne and others disembarked. In the 21 hours it had taken to travel from Karlsruhe, they had been given nothing to eat and only slept a few halting minutes in the overpacked carriage. They dragged themselves and their belongings a mile east to the edge of town. At last, they arrived at Holzheim Officer Camp. The former infantry barracks, built a year before the war, was ringed by tall stone walls and lit by electric arc lamps. Guards directed them through the arched main entrance on the camp's western side. Although exhausted and desperate for food, they were made to assemble in the rows on the cobblestone path in front of the barracks, and were forced to wait in the chill of night beneath the glare of the arc lamps. After a long time, a beetle-browed camp officer strode up, smoking a cigar. Captain Karl Neymar. Tall and stout, like an upright rectangle, except for his brows. His bowling ball of a head was pasty white and cleanly shaved. He wore a military cap, perched at a rakish angle. Neymar opened by saying that he was happy to see them, as he was glad to see any Englishman. many of whom he called great friends before the war. He hoped that this would be the case again, but in the meanwhile, war was war. He advised that they would be best served, to write straight away to their families and friends. Oh, wait. He advised that they would be best served, to write straight away to their families and friends, for your thickest clothes, it is very cold here in winter, He concluded, "So now, gentlemen, I expect you'll be glad to go to your bedrooms. I wish you a good night. You will be searched in the morning." With that, the guards took them to the third floor of one of the two main barracks, a 4-story whitewashed building with a mansard roof covered in slate. As they climbed the steps, many of the prisoners still believed Holzenlein might well live up to what Blondlou had promised. Some imagined bedroom candles and comforting nightcap awaited them. They were divided into 3 rooms with high ceilings and bare walls. The rooms had stoves, but no coal or wood to fuel them. Each officer had a small cupboard, a stool, and an iron-framed bed whose mattress was filled with straw, wood shavings, and paper. Although they were desperately hungry, the guards offered no food, and the doors clanged ominously shut when they left. Still, Rathborn and others continued to hope for the best. When the morning roll call was made, the 25 officers gathered outside. They had been hungry the night before. Now they were nearly faint. Beside Namor stood the titular head of the camp, Hedwig. Habrich. This is confusing. Habrich. Yeah, Habrich. An early man. An elderly man. He had the look of a doddering old fool and merely stood by and watched his camp officer address the new arrivals. Namor asked if they had breakfasted, and the... Apologies, people. Namor asked if they had breakfast. The men answered no. Namor promptly ordered his guards to prepare a meal, the likes of which he promised you wouldn't get in Regent Street or Piccadilly. Visions of bacon and grilled sausage overcame the British officers. They hurried to the dining hall on the 2nd floor of their block, only to be served some tepid intimidation coffee made with acorns, nothing else. When Rathborn complained, Namor pretended that he could not understand why they were upset. As day after day passed, the officers in Holzheim were allotted little more than cabbage soup and small portions of bread. They quickly grew to despise Karl Namor, a bully of the First Order who was beholden to a rash temper and thick skin. He skulked about the camp in his starched uniform and high cavalry boots, smoking a huge cigar while searching out trouble like a dog would a bone. No slight from a prisoner. A weak salute, a roll of the eyes, and an imprudent remark passed unnoticed and unpunished. The prisoners did not hold back in their descriptions they recorded in their diaries and letters home. He was a cad, low-bred ruffian, personification of hate, a bloated, pompous, crawling individual, a man of unbridled ferocity and bravado, a cheat, a plausible rogue, and a coward with all attributes of one. He deceives, he is cruel, he blusters, he is dishonest, he cringes. Prone to apologetic fits of rage, typically while brandishing a revolver or his walking cane. Namor ran down and threatened prisoners with a zeal that left him red-faced and panting for breath. The root of his grievances was unclear, and he was given prosperity to tell lies. His background was murky. Although born in Germany, he spent 17 years in the United States. He might have tended bar in Milwaukee. He might have built billiard tables in New York. He might have done both. His stories changed as often as he told them. Despite being in his 60s, he claimed he fought at the Somme for 1 week. He said, which had been enough for him. A despicable character, Namor was a perfect choice for General von Hastig, head of the 10th Army District and responsible for overseeing POW camps in his area. He wanted Holzheim, a camp established to hold the most troublesome Allied officers in Germany, to be ruled by someone who viewed his charges as nothing better than criminals. Chapter 8. Over the course of the first months in operations, officers poured into Holzheim in the hundreds, many of them invertebrate escape artists from camps across Germany, including Ingstedt, Friedberg, Augustabad, Schwarzwitz, in the dreaded underground prison Fort Zorndorf. Holzheim was no way ready to house the hundreds of POWs and the guards who oversaw them. The cookhouse lacked dishes and only 3 pots. The washrooms had but a handful of taps and no showers, nor was there a parcel room or a canteen room which to buy goods. If this was a prisoner's Mecca, it was a Spartan one. The epidemic of disorganization, there was too little food and not enough fuel to heat the stoves. Heydrich became overwhelmed. Prisoners practiced in the art of escape knew that their best chance was often in the camp's early days when chinks in the security had yet to be discovered. The chaos at Holzheim added to this opportunity. The prison was a series of secure enclosures, one smaller than the next, like nesting dolls. On the outside was a rectangular stone wall, 8 feet high, topped in places with barbed wire palisade angled at 120 degrees to prevent climbing. Within this was a half oval, like the shape of the letter D, protected by a 12-foot-high fence of thick mesh topped by another barbed wire palisade. A chain of sentry boxes was positioned directly outside this fence. 6 feet separated this 6 feet separated this enclosure from another barrier, which was the same shape made from a simple 3-strand wire fence strung on low wooden posts. The space in between these 2 fences was no man's land. Prisoners were allowed only within the inner enclosure, which contained the barracks and the Spitzplatz, a dual parade ground and exercise yard. In a sense, Holzheim was a prison within a prison within a prison, all set 150 miles from the Dutch border. 2 prisoners recently arrived from Fort Zandorf and were particularly keen to find a way out. Canadian infantry officer John Thorne, captured on the front in April 1915, had made several breakout attempts at previous camps, one of them dressed as a German war widow, black crepe, veil, and all. His partner was RFC pilot Wally Wilkins. Thorne and Wilkins scoured the camp for weakness and found a significant one. The 2 barracks, known as Block A and Block B, were of identical design. Each had a main building, 50 yards long, with wings at the end that extended back and away from the Spielplatz. Each had 2 entrances, one at each end, facing the main grounds. Inside, stairs at both ends ran from the cellar up 4 floors to the low-ceilinged attic. An entire third of Block A, including the wing closest to the main gate, outside all barriers apart from the surrounding wall, was reserved for the Commodore, the officers, the sleeping quarters for the German staff. Wooden walls separated this section from the quarters of the British officers, and it had its own entrance. Thorne and Wilkins figured that if they could open up the wooden barricade on the attic level, they could enter the Commodore headquarters, come down the stairs, and exit Block A just beside the main gate. The gate was in the part of the camp occupied only by Germans, so its lone guard was unlikely to be suspicious of anyone leaving through it, especially anyone dressed in German uniform. Late at night, they snuck out of their rooms in Block A, went up to the attic. In 2 hours, using only a penknife, Wilkins managed to cut a small panel out of the barricade wall, which was constructed from wooden planks, 2 inches thick, and bound with wire. When they removed the panel, they found another wall of boards, thicker than the ones on their side, secured with 6-inch nails bent at the ends. Wilkins was unfazed. He needed only to straighten the nails, then sever their exposed ends. Then he could push the boards free. A penknife, however, could not do this job. Informed of the need for wire cutters, several of their friends searched the camp, and not a half a day later, a pair was nicked from a German officer who was fixing the fence. After lights out, Thorne and Wilkins returned to the attic and finished their escape hatch. A quick inspection of the German side confirmed their theory that a quick inspection of the German side confirmed their theory that they could access the stairs. Then they replaced the 2 panels, hoping that they would not be discovered too soon. Next, they prepared to go. One of the prisoners had smuggled a sewing kit into Holzheim with him. Within the days, he whipped up 2 jackets and 2 pairs of gray trousers with red stripes down the sides. Food for the border run was donated by fellow prisoners. On September 28th, the day they were meant to go, Wilkins came down with a high fever. Knowing that the hatch might be discovered at any minute, or that a new security measure might sink their plan, he gave his place to Ringo Gaskell, a British Indian Army captain and fellow veteran of Fort Zandorf. After answering to their name at the last roll call of the day, Thorne and Gaskell returned to their barracks, donned their disguises, placed their civilian clothes and knapsacks into two of the plain sacks the guards often used during work detail. An hour later, they crawled through the barricade wall in the attic, replaced the panels behind them, and descended the stairs in the commodore. Just before they got to the door, they saw Heidrich and several other Germans. They continued on, not saying a word. Nobody stopped them. Once outside, they made a beeline for the main gate and did not slow down until they passed the guard and were on their way out. The next morning roll call came, and still there'd been no... The next morning roll call came, and still there had not been an alarm. When a guard called the names of Thorne and Gaskell, their fellow prisoners answered for them. Then Neymar arrived onto the Spitzplatz and summoned Thorne, something to do with contraband found on him when he arrived at Holzheim. Not wishing to risk further subterfuge, a British officer who would help prepare the escape stood forward. In a calm voice, he announced that Thorne had left the evening before on a journey to Holland. A greater cheer rose among the prisoners, sending Neymar into a steam. He demanded the roll call again, and Thorne and Gaskell were found missing. Commander Heidrich, a man predisposed to inaction, left the matter for Neymar to handle. He ordered everyone to return to the barracks, and a search began for how the two officers had escaped. Bloodhounds were brought in. Freshly arrived from Cochdale, Shorty Cochran shared a room with Thorne. Thinking quickly, Cochran sprinkled cayenne pepper onto his fellow Canadian's old shoes. Then he took Thorne's socks and replaced them with his own. The same was done for Gaskell. Soon enough, the guards gathered up the escapees' remaining clothes and shoes and brought them out onto the Spitzplatz. The bloodhounds first took the scent of the socks and began racing around the camp, like they were chasing ghosts. Watching from the windows, Cochran and others could barely contain their laughter. Then the dogs buried their noses in the boots laden with pepper. After a good whiff, they went completely mad, leaping about, hurling themselves back and forth, their handlers barely able to keep a grip on their leashes. Shouts and hollers followed from the windows. Enraged by the scene, Neymar drew his revolver and brandished it at the barracks. After an intense inspection, which failed to uncover the hatch, the Germans had no idea how Thorne and Gaskell got out undetected. A train, sniffed out by the dogs, was suspected as a possible route until its diameter was determined too small to fit a man. Still, it was cemented closed. Wilkins, who was by now feeling better, decided to use an attic hatch for himself the following night. Others aimed to follow. For all its rings of defenses, perhaps Holzheim was not the unbreakable fortress that Neymar boasted. Then, on October 1st, 1917, Holzheim was visited by General Karl von Haschnick of the 10th Army Corps Division, an ogre of a Prussian officer and Heidrich and Neymar's superior. The Pradu relied that Haschnick's son had been killed by the British, and it was clear he hated them. The prisoners, now numbering over 500, paraded into the Spitzplatz and drew together in straight lines, under the close watch of Neymar. They showed proper form and answered their names promptly when called. They had only just started to receive food parcels to supplement their diet, and they intended to give the general no reason to stop deliveries or to make their lives any more difficult. All the staff from Commandant Heidrich down were present. My brain needs to work these together. Apologies. All the staff from Commandant Heidrich were present, dressed in their finest uniforms, their boots polished to a shine. The previous night, another handful of prisoners had gotten away, their method unknown, and Neymar intended to use the escapes to get himself promoted over his superior. General Haschnick was quiet through the roll call, but he toured the barracks and other facilities. He made no secret of his feelings towards the prisoners. They were barbarians and Schwiesenhunds. And in his opinion, they did not deserve to be allowed to live, let alone receive letters. Neymar agreed. No treatment was too harsh for their enemy. Near the end of his short visit, Haschnick allowed Major John Wildam, the senior British officer, to address him. 46 years old, an army lifer and veteran of several campaigns, Wildman was unafraid. In German, he first demanded better accommodations for his men. There are no public rooms, no library, one solitary cookhouse, and no bathroom, he said. Hodgson turned to Hodgbrick and Neymar. They spoke quietly. Then the general responded that a proper bathroom and another cookhouse would be provided. The rest were luxuries. Back in his office, Hodgbrick gently suggested to Hodgson that the British major, and the prisoners overall, deserved some modicum of respect. Neymar interjected that respect was something that was given too much of. Within 48 hours of the general's departure, Hodgbrick was ordered to pack up his office. Neymar was now completely in charge. After some of his first acts of commandant, Neymar ordered a guard to fire at prisoners in the barracks building who were mocking the Germans during their morning drill marches. He made the sick and invalid stand in the parade ground for hours in the cold. He shut all the prisoners in their barracks for a day. He ordered that any officers caught in the act of a breakout be shot on sight. Still, the escapes continued. Through October 1917, batches of prisoners continued to arrive at Holzheim, many of them with a roster of failed escapes under their belt. Over 60 men came from Stroltheim, including David Gray and Caspar Kennard, who had found themselves together there again after being shuffled from camp to camp. The new prisoners gathered in the Spielplatz, its grass now trampled into a muddy soup because of the rain and daily tread of hundreds of boots. The prisoners stood on one side, guards on the other, and Karl Neymar performed his typical routine for the newcomers. The Stroltheim arrivals knew Neymar well. He had been the camp officer there before Neymar. He had been the camp officer there before Holzheim was opened and had ordered guards to bayonet prisoners. 3 of them had been seriously wounded. When asked to account for his order, he had declared, "I have nothing to do with it at all. I was not in the camp. I did not give the order." "Look at these criminals and mark them down," Commandant Neymar said to the guards. "They are not officers and gentlemen. They are criminals, and I hope you treat them such." One officer bluntly said, "Oh, shut up, Neymar." Neymar flushed. "Did you tell me to shut up?" "Yes, I did," the officer said. "Then I will have you arrested immediately, in 5 minutes," Neymar roared. Some of the officers snickered at his lack of certainty. Some officers Apologies, people. Some of the officers snickered at his lack of certainty, some a little too loudly. Neymar ordered the guards to clear the Spielplatz. "You are very clever, yes? Well, I have made a special study of this escaping. You will not escape from here. You think I, the commandant, know nothing. You are wrong. I know damn all." Paroxysms of laughter followed his mistaken admission of being a know-nothing. Prisoners were hurried at point of bayonet to their assigned barracks. There, they quickly learned about the removable panel in the attic. Despite intensive searches, more sentry patrols, widening the stretch of no man's land, and interrogating anyone who had escaped and been caught on the run, Neymar had yet to be discovered their method. More than a dozen prisoners had used the hatch, and there was a veritable German uniform factory in one of the British barracks rooms. However, not a single man had yet succeeded in making the long journey to Holland. Thorn, Wilkins, Gaskell, and all others were captured on their runs to the Dutch border. It was risk enough to escape the walls of Holzheim, but that was only the first step to freedom. Chapter 9. "Get up!" A guard pounded on the door, rousing Gray and the 3 other officers who he shared a room with in Block B. The pounding and the call was repeated down the corridor. If they did not rise quickly enough, guards would enter their rooms and shove them out of their beds with the butts of their rifles. Roll call was at 9 a.m. sharp, and the prisoners spilled out of the barracks onto the snow-dusted Spielplatz to make it. Stragglers and those who failed to properly salute, or to stand at attention in uniform, were rewarded with a stay in the jug for a day, or 3. Cost price, Neymar would say in his shaky grasp of American idiom. No matter how cold the day, the men were forced to wait an interminable time as one of Neymar's lieutenants walked up and down the lines, calling out names and checking them off his list. Since arriving at Holzheim, Gray had realized that Neymar had created an environment intended to dehumanize the officers by 1,000 petty humiliations. Apart from the dining room, which could only seat 100 men at times, there was no common room in which they could assemble. This meant that most prisoners ate where they slept. The officers conducted church services at the ends of corridors or in stairwells, where gatherings for such lectures and card games was also held. Men scrambled over and around another like ants in a nest. One was almost never alone with one's own thoughts. Waiting was one of the most subtle instruments of harassment used. They waited for the morning roll call, and when it was over, they waited for a wash at the taps in the yard. They waited for a paltry breakfast of bitter coffee and hard biscuits. They waited to get close enough to the notice board to see if they had a new parcel. If they did, they joined another line and waited to receive the parcel. Then they waited again while the guards hacked to pieces or spilled out onto the table items their families or friends had sent. The queue for the parcels started in the morning, and if you were not there early enough, you could well be waiting until the end of the day. They waited to use a stove, of which there were too few, to cook their lunch. They waited for yet another round of inclinations. They waited to use the lavatory, to buy firewood at the canteen, to get their ration book for bread and wine. They waited for letters that did not come, for their name to be called at the 4 p.m. roll call, for whatever watery stew they were serving for dinner. Once a whole cow's skull was found floating in the cauldron they dished it from. By 6 p.m., they were locked in for the night. They had spent hours standing, waiting, time stretched out to lengths that they could never have imagined. The little tyrannies exercised on the prisoners at Holzheim were almost limitless. Despite, or perhaps because of the inviting countryside outside the walls, Neymar refused to grant parole walks. As a result, there had only been half oval of grounds inside the wire for exercise and recreation. This was at best 410 yards around, space taken up by 2 cookhouses, horse trials, a woodshed, a parcel office, a potato patch, and a dozen straggling trees. They tried to create a cricket pitch and football field in the limited space, but Neymar prohibited most games, telling them that one of the arc lights had been broken by an errant ball. Their offer to pay for its replacement was met with silence. There was a gymnasium, built for the original barracks, but it was set between the inner wire and the surrounding walls, out of bounds. And so, when not in line or sitting in their packed rooms, prisoners wandered back and forth in the crowded Spielplatz like penned cattle. Bathing facilities was a horse trough that had hot water only twice a week, and men had to wash in full view of the rest of the camp. A shower block was built on the senior officer's request, but Neymar decided to use it to shelter his Alterson guard dogs instead. He even posted a sign outside. When a more suitable place in the camp could be found for the dogs, officers may have baths on Tuesdays and Fridays. Theft was persuasive. The guards destroyed the cakes, bread, meat, and other food sent to the prisoners with shameless glee. But they also stole what they pleased, especially cigarettes and soap. Letters from home, often describing what had been sent, were misplaced. Goods were supposed to be sold at a cost, but prisoners were charged triple the prices of other camps on everything from coffee, wine, butter, firewood, eyeglasses, pencils, razors, notepads, watches, and toilet paper. Neymar also extorted charges for such necessities as food, hot water, and fuel for the kitchens, as well as turning a blind eye to outright theft. He also set the tone of abuse at the camp, and reveled in it. He paraded around the camp grounds and barracks throughout the day, hands stuffed in his greatcoat, chewing on his cigar. His voice could change from a soft, dolorous coo at one moment to a harsh rasp the next. He spat on the floors in front of British officers. He ordered rooms emptied at bayonet point and conducted searches that left beds and lockers in shambles, for no reason other than a sour mood. He sent men to solitary or closed the parcel room. The non-stop pinpricks that came from Neymar's rule left the men feeling rattled and helpless. One officer at Holzheim wrote to his mother, "Time drags slowly on here, much the same day after day. It is extraordinary how restless one gets after a while. You feel that you must be doing something, yet cannot settle down to do anything." Some had lost a great deal of weight, others went listless. One or two were spiraling into madness. With winter coming and very little fuel to heat their rooms, their lives were certain to get worse. The wearisome sameness of the days, the monotony of the faces, the unchanged landscape, the intolerant talk about the war, all these tended to produce the effect of complete and utter depression, one prisoner wrote. This was far and away our worst enemy. Whole days were drenched in incurable melancholia. Second Lieutenant William Henry likened the effect of barbed wire disease to a green mole that grew thick on his mind, leaving him stale and incapable of joy. There was no outlet to air their grievances. Neymar refused to meet with Wilhelm and other senior officers, nor would they had much luck with him if he had. As far as he was concerned, his countrymen were the ones suffering because of the British and their allies. A rumor circulated at the camp that German Brittany had met in The Hague to review POW and civilian internment conditions. From what they could make out, officers from both countries who had been held for more than 18 months would soon be sent to neutral Holland and Switzerland, where they would remain until the end of the war. But the war showed little sign of ending, and the internment in Holland seemed like a fool's promise. Each man would have to find a way to survive the place they now called Hellmind, or the black hole of Germany. Some of the men remained determined to survive it by escaping. In late October, several officers, including Kennard, made a break through the as yet undiscovered panel in Block A. Kennard ran into trouble attempting to cross the river. Weiser, whose width and fast current made for a perilous swim. He was caught, returned, and sentenced to a solitary jail. He was one of the last to use the hatch. After yet another indecisive search, the guards found it at last, and a whole new series of security measures were put in place. The barricades in Block A were reinforced with iron sheets. Permit passes were instituted for the main gate and elsewhere. Windows were nailed shut. Barbed wire fences were raised. The censoring of letters and inspections of parcel intensified. The barracks were scoured for contraband, and the number of guards increased. Neymar made every effort to ensure that the black mark on his record from all those early escapes would be erased by the prevention of any future ones. The Holzheim inmates were clearly jailbreakers of the first order, and not only did he intend to make the prison impervious to their schemes, he would crush their spirits while he was at it. "You see, gentlemen," he announced to the whole camp, "you cannot get out now. I should not try. It will be bad for your health." Private Dick Cash of the 19th Battalion, Australian Imperial Force, had no plans to escape. Cash was one of Holzheim's 130 orderlies, and while the camp was a terrible place, his chances of starving there or being worked to death were slim, compared to the salt mines or forced labor camps that his rank could be subjected to. When war broke out, Cash was 37 years old, a father of 3 and owner of a small grocery store and photography business in Thurmai, Australia. He arrived on the front in March of 1917, and his battalion saw its share of heavy fighting. On May 3rd, they were ordered across no man's land in an early morning assault of the strategic German stronghold at Bullecourt. The Australians faced withering heavy machine gun fire in their approach to the enemy lines. During the attack, Cash was shot in the chest. The bullet punctured his left lung, but he continued ahead. A series of mortars threw him first skyward, then sideways. Shrapnel pierced his back, and many of his teeth were knocked out before he landed in a shell hole, boots first. The ongoing barrage then filled up the hole around him, until all but his head was underground. There he remained for almost 30 hours, trying to squirm his way free, before he was taken prisoner. Field surgery and a torturous 300-mile ride into Germany had followed. Cash managed to survive the maggot-infested squalor and rough attention accorded many wounded Allied prisoners, and spent the next couple months at a hospital in Hamelin. By September, he had recovered enough to work as an orderly. Compared to the horrors he had faced at the front and in the hospital, Cash knew that he could abide Holzheim as long as he had to in order to survive and get back to his wife and family. He lived with the rest of the orderlies, many of whom were also recovering wounded. In Block B, 20 men slept in the same size room as 12 officers, who were already tightly quartered at that number. The orderlies got out of their cold beds before the officers woke up. They dressed in gray-blue tunics, trousers, and caps sewn with bands of yellow cloth down the sides, and their prisoner number stamped in red on the front of their shirts. On the back, in the large letters, was KG, Kriegsstufe, prisoner of war. At 7 a.m., they began their day serving as the nanny, or Batman, for 5 officers. They steeped pots of tea, they collected their uniforms, caps, and boots, and polished and cleaned them before the wake-up call. Then they ate their breakfast before showing up for the morning roll call. After that, they returned to their officers' rooms to make their beds, empty their ashtrays, and tidy up. Then they swept the corridors and staircases, twice weekly. They changed the bed sheets and beat the rugs of dust. The Germans then typically assigned the orderlies to some menial task around the camp, such as bundling up paper or hauling firewood. After that was complete, they returned to their officers' rooms to straighten up, make tea, and help serve meals. Most of the work was fairly light, albeit monotonous, and they rotated rooms so they did not have to suffer any particular needy officer for long. As one orderly wrote, taking officers by and large, they were pleasant and easygoing crowd, perhaps inclined to a little thoughtless. For those this is a confusing word, Tartars, the orderlies could always exact a trivial retribution, a broken teacup, undercooked food, the signal that they could only be pushed so far. None of this service seemed odd to Cash. His fellow common-rank soldiers, or the officers they served, although they were all prisoners, so traditionally was the class separation between them that not even Neymar, who abused them all at every opportunity, ventured to make the officers fend entirely for themselves. European society had a rigid class system, and the military was yet another beast. However, officers and orderlies alike knew that they were all in this war together. They all faced the same cruelties and whims of Neymar. The dreary repetition of days, the interminable lines, the thefts, the meager amount of food, and most importantly, the absence of freedom. A number of orderlies who had helped officers escape from other camps provided them with uniforms and acting as lookouts. They intended to do the same as Holzheim. Dick Cash, with his toothless smile, made clear to the top breakout artist his willingness to help. And that is to Chapter 10. Bit longer today, but I think it was fair.